Okay. Good luck.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. I can see that some of you are already there. Would you mind writing your names on the chat and saying what you are teaching, what languages you are teaching, where you are teaching, whether you are teaching in secondary education or adult education, higher education? Okay, Joao, you're teaching secondary in XX and languages. Pilar, Spanish. Joao, Spanish as well. French, bonjour. Canada, great. German in Milton Keynes. Spanish. French, Spanish, and German here. Portugal, Ana, hola. Greek, fabulous. Español, English, Española. ¿Y dónde enseña? Where do you teach, Lucia? In Britain or in Spain? In Madrid, muy bien. So we have people from many countries. Great. So anybody who has joined, it would be nice if you write your name, what you teach, and where you are, where you teach normally. Hi, Olivier. Your language, French coach, also great. Okay, so we get started. My name is Maria Blanco. I am a senior lecturer in Spanish at the University of Westminster in London. And I also work as a freelance language learning strategies coach. And I am delighted to be here because this is my favorite topic, language learning strategies. And I love sharing the experience I have, the research I've done with teachers and students from all over the world. So I'm going to start sharing the PowerPoint that I'm going to go through. And what I ask you is, please, there'll be some moments in the talk when I ask some questions so that we can interact. But then if you have any further questions or comments, you have Q&A chat. And if you could please write them there instead of in the middle of the session. And then at the end, we go through the questions and answers. But at some point, I will ask you a question for you to interact in the chat. So I'm going to share the PowerPoint. And so the talk is Empower Your Students, Teach Language Learning Strategies. Empowerment is a big thing in this topic because it really, language learning strategies, I believe, is what helps to empower truly the students to learn well by themselves. And what we are going to go through in the talk, I mean, the objectives of the talk are to present you a simple and effective framework for learner strategy training. I'm going to share some work produced by the students, examples of the work they do in the workshops I've done with them, to share their feedback and my own feedback of this experience, and to facilitate the exchange of some ideas and experiences in and between language teams. It would be between all of us. The content is, first of all, we are going to discuss why teach language learning strategies. Then I'm going to tell you what language learning strategies to teach. In my experience, what works best. And then the framework, how to teach them. Then we look at the feedback and sample of students' work. And then we have some questions and comments. And at the end, I will give you a handout with the summary of the things we've gone through in the workshop, some of the key concepts, a list of strategies that you could use during once you start working with this, if you start doing that with your students, and some bibliography as well. I will do that at the end. So first of all, I wanted to tell you that the ideas that I'm sharing with you come from basically two sources. One of them is my experience. I've been teaching now since '94 Spanish as foreign language, so I have a lot of experience teaching. I've also learned English. I learned some French when I was in secondary school. I've learned a bit of my regional language as well. So I have my own experience as a language learner, but basically lots of it teaching Spanish as a foreign language. And then what happened with when I started teaching as a foreign language, Spanish as a foreign language, was that I started in adult education here in UK. And I discovered that my students were extremely motivated. They were adults that in many cases had their homes in Spain or used to travel a lot to Spain, were very interested in the culture, but they were very dependent on me. If I didn't give them clear instructions on what to do, what to study, I could see that they didn't have much independence. So I started teaching them tips, strategies, simple strategies for improving their speaking, their grammar. And I saw that they responded very well to that. And then I started doing myself an MA in modern languages in education, and I came across the research done in language learning strategies. And I thought it was fascinating. And so I realized that this was what I was looking for when I was teaching Spanish to these students, and that I could produce some good materials, at least a brochure, something like that for them, to help them. I did my dissertation as well on the topic, and then I moved on to teaching at university level, and I started piloting activities and materials with the students. And I saw that they responded really well. So I've been doing that in higher education since 2000, since 22 years. And the result that I've seen is very positive. So the ideas come from this experience, the research I did, and then research in applied linguistics, cognitive psychology, and educational neuroscience. Many of the principles I use are backed up by this research. So this is where the ideas come from. Now, before we get on to more, it's important that I explain that when I talk about learner strategies or language learning strategies, I am referring to specific actions taken by the learner to make their process of learning more effective and enjoyable. So anything that the student does to make it easier for them and to make it enjoyable for them, this is what I call a learner strategy or language learning strategy. So my first question, and it's to you, is why do you think it's important to teach language learning strategies? I have my own view on this, but it would be nice to hear from you. What do you think are the benefits of that? If you could please write on the chat. It doesn't have to be long, just short sentences. Empower is the key to adapt the learner. Students' outcomes are better. The individual, yeah, to give them voice and choice, beautiful. To give them confidence, yeah. Yeah. They can work independently, covering the kinesthetic, auditive, and visual. They are transferable. Yeah, great. Okay, so more motivated, yes. Yeah. To make them aware of the process. Empower students, give them the right tools that they can use in different scenarios, great. Workers of their own learnings. How to learn, learning how to learn is important, and we barely get taught at all at schools. To take ownership, to work outside the classroom, fabulous. Thank you. So yes, everything that you say, for me the same. I agree with every point that you've made. Here you have in this image a little summary of some of the key terms. Well, first of all, I would say that language learning strategies help them to make the journey much more successful, because as some of you were mentioning, we know that if they want to learn well the language, they will have to learn in the classroom, but also outside. Most of it will be done outside the classroom. So when they are outside the classroom, there is usually no teacher. So they have to manage even their homework, they have to manage on their own. And they can take advantage of all sorts of environments like these days, internet, also to make the most out of it. And for that, if they are equipped with some of these tools, then it's easier for them. My experience is that once they have language learning strategies, a good set of them, they are able to, they perform much better in the courses, in the language courses as well. As some of you were mentioning, they get more motivated, more confident, they get better results in exams as well. So overall, their experience is better. It makes them feel empowered. And as you were mentioning as well, these are lifelong learning skills. Many of them, we see that they can be applied in other subjects. In fact, when I ask them for feedback, sometimes I get comments that they have been using some of the strategies learned in Spanish in other subjects like business. So it is really, really very advantageous for them to do this. And it becomes more enjoyable because when they have the tools and they see more success, they enjoy more the process. So for me, there is a very strong rationale, and I can see that for you as well. Otherwise, probably you wouldn't be in this talk as well. So now the key question is, what language learning strategies to teach? And this is what I can share with you. For me, in my head, I think about what you can see on the left side of the screen. I think about the classification of strategies as metacognitive, cognitive, social, and affective. This is a classic classification that was done many, many years ago in research, in applied linguistics, in some large studies they did in USA with students of foreign languages. Now, metacognitive strategies are the strategies that we use to manage the process of language learning. Is any of you aware of examples of metacognitive strategies? If you know of any metacognitive strategy, can you please write it on the chat? Often people are not. So showing them how to learn vocabulary effectively. Okay, metacognitive strategies are strategies like setting learning goals, like becoming aware of difficulties that one has when you are learning. Often my students are the verb endings, because Spanish has many, many different verb endings compared to other languages, or word order. So the student is aware of difficulties that has, challenges, things that are not easy for them, things that where they need further support or they need more study. Another metacognitive strategy would be to be able to assess their own progress, to see how far they've gone, whether they know well something or they don't know it. So it goes beyond the level of cognition. And cognitive strategies are the ones that we are familiar with most of the time, which is the strategies that we use directly with the language in order to learn the language and to be able to access the language. For example, writing a vocabulary notebook, doing a flashcard, simply translating words or putting words into sentences, integrating them in sentences, or associating words with images. So anything that we use connected with the language in order to learn the language, that's a cognitive strategy. And then social strategies are those we use when we are with people, and strategies that help us to learn a language. Very simple, like when we don't understand somebody, we ask them, can you please repeat? Or can you please say this a bit more slowly? Now that's a social strategy, because we are using in the social context a strategy to help us to learn more. Affective strategies are the ones connected with emotions, to be able to handle anxiety or to be able to find ways of enjoying the process of learning. So that would be the affective strategies. But these are kind of more theoretical classification. I don't use this classification with the students. With the students, I use what you have on the right side of the screen. So with the students, I tell them, okay, today we are going to learn some reading strategies, or today we are going to learn some listening strategies or some speaking strategies. So it will be very simple and easy to understand. And with my students, I have focused mainly on strategies for vocabulary, for pronunciation and grammar, the three key elements. Also some strategies for writing, listening, and reading. But mainly, in my case, in my context, it's been about giving them strategies for speaking, which is one of the skills where they struggle the most, and to teach them how to learn vocabulary effectively, because vocabulary is the key ingredient of any language, pronunciation, and also grammar. So the strategies to teach, you have to decide depending on your context. Obviously, if you are teaching a speaking course, you need to spend a good amount of time on teaching them speaking strategies. It depends on the context. So the next step is how to teach language learning strategies. What is the framework? And the framework that I am sharing with you is the one that I have been using for many, many years. It's very simple. I don't think you are going to find anything new here as a teacher, but it's just that it's used in this particular context of learning strategies. So the first step is, I'm going to, let's imagine an example. We are going to focus on vocabulary strategies. Let's imagine that the student needs to learn a lot of vocabulary at some point, which they always do in language courses. That's always the case. So in my case, I'm going to give you the example of beginners. When I'm teaching beginners, I find there is one of the lessons when they are learning to describe their neighborhood or the city, where we get lots of new vocabulary about adjectives to describe a place, places of interest. So they get kind of flooded with lots of vocabulary in that topic. So I tell them, okay, so we are going to look at how you can learn this vocabulary effectively. And the first step I take is to motivate them. And I ask them, why do you think it's important to learn a good range of vocabulary? What are the benefits for you of learning all this vocabulary? And usually they respond very easily to this question, because they understand that without vocabulary, they cannot express themselves really. But the first one is to connect with their motivation, to remind them that vocabulary is important. That's why we are going to focus on that. Then, sorry, I've jumped the previous one. Then this is very important. I discuss with them what they are doing at the present moment. So I ask them questions like, what strategies have you used so far for learning vocabulary? And which of these strategies have worked well for you? Or what do you find challenging when learning vocabulary? So I want them to become aware of what they've done so far. Very often they already have some good strategies, and sometimes it's very simple. I write vocabulary down many times, or I keep a vocabulary notebook, or I do flashcards with that. I want to know also where they are at that point in time. And I want to reinforce that whatever is working them well for them at that point, that they should keep doing. That's great. And if they are struggling, which in many cases they are, because they say that they would like to remember more vocabulary and they are unable to remember so much vocabulary, then we have something to work with. So the second step is to discuss their present strategies. The third step is to introduce new strategies. How do I do this? I prepare before the session a list of strategies, quite long, where I include those that I consider are the best for them, for the kind of course that I am teaching, for the kind of students I have. And I present it to them in a PowerPoint and give them the PowerPoint or a handout. And so it's like we go from a narrow set of strategies that they usually have to present them with a good range of strategies for them to consider. That's step number 3. In step number 4, if there is time in the program, which is very tricky, and I guess that for some of you will be the case as well, programs tend to be loaded with content. So making time for these things is not simple sometimes. I encourage them, if I don't have time in the lesson, I encourage them to practice some, introduce new strategies and pilot them, see how it goes. But sometimes I can make time and say, then we dedicate sometimes in the class and they do this, they work, then they share. And we have, sometimes they share in small groups, sometimes in large groups. So we have these 4 steps within a session that it may be as short as 10 minutes. When we don't do the last step in 10 minutes, this can be done. If I want to introduce the 4th step, it takes a bit longer. But what I tell you is that for sure, in 10 and 15 minutes, you can do these steps easily with a group of students. So we move on to the next thing. Yeah. So this would be the summary. The summary of the steps would be, number 1 would be to motivate them. Remember to remind them, if we are doing vocabulary strategies, to discuss why vocabulary is important. Then discuss their present strategies. Their present strategies is what are they doing right now, which is working well for them, and what they are finding challenging. Sometimes it takes them a while to be able to put this into words because they are not used to being asked this question. So I often put them in pairs to discuss it first and then report. Then number 3 is to introduce them to new strategies that I mentioned to you. In my case, I just simply display them in the PowerPoint on the screen and just that, and give them the handout. And then number 4, in an ideal world, when it's possible, is to do the practice with them. And I'm going to show you examples of what they did, some of the students in beginners Spanish, when I gave time in the class to do some of these flashcards. There was one session where we did the vocabulary learning strategies. Then I gave them some guidelines as well as to how to do the flashcards, the effective way of doing flashcards, and then they did them in the session. And they produced some examples. I took some pictures, which I very much encourage you to do as well. If you do this kind of work, take some pictures of examples that you think are good, so that then you can share it with other students, or if you do teacher training as well. Okay, so these are the 4 steps. Now, examples of strategies, I encourage them to do vocabulary notebooks for vocabulary. I encourage them to do spidergrams, mind maps, because there is very good research done on how these techniques help long-term retention. It helps them as well to assess how much they can remember. So these are examples. And I'm going to share now a video of a student from one of the courses who did a vocabulary notebook. I'm going to stop the PowerPoint and share the video now. If there is any problem with the audio, do let me know, or the image, but it should be working well.
So this is my Spanish book, exercise book, whatever you want to call it.
Can you hear it well? Yes, great. Okay, so I carry on. This is a BA student of Spanish.
And this is about like the size of my hand. And I started, after every week, I started writing down the things I didn't know, the vocabulary and the grammar and stuff. Here, about this. So this was for semester 1, but then I noticed that it got kind of mixed up, and grammar and vocabulary at the same place is just not the right thing to learn. So for semester 2, I started to divide it into 2 sections, into a grammar section and a vocabulary section. And then I also divided it into the weeks. And after every seminar, I wrote down the things I didn't know, clase 1 y clase 2. And yeah, the same with vocabulary, but only the vocabulary I didn't know. Yeah, and it's important that there's like a space in between, that you can like hold it, you close it, and then you can like ask yourself the vocabulary. Yeah, and I did this the whole semester, and important for me is especially that I could combine my creativity with Spanish, so it was like a lot of fun making this for me, and especially like the size is very important, so it's just like a little notebook, and this literally fits in every bag of mine, so whenever I was like waiting for the train or for the bus, I could just put it out and learn a little bit. And this was basically everything I did for Spanish, and it really helped me memorizing words and grammar.
Great, so here you can see a top, really, this is a top class example of how a student has used, you love it, don't you? I mean, I think any teacher would love this kind of this kind of work. It's like when you see it, that gets me really motivated to keep going with this kind of training, because these students picked it up, everything. Even if you see the section where she puts the vocabulary in lists, on one side is Spanish, the other side is German, she understands, she took on board that, because if she covers one of the lists, she can test herself. She can test whether she's remembering the Spanish or the translation into German, and so well organized. I've seen real miracles after these very short sessions on strategy, so I very much encourage you to to do your own thing with your students. So carry on. This is an example of flashcards. When I did this session with beginners on flashcards, this student summarized the questions and key answers to the oral test for the entire year in this bunch of flashcards. And, you know, for a beginner, I know for teachers, sometimes it looks too easy, but for a complete beginner to remember so many questions, so many topics after 1 year, in my case at university, with only 2 hours per week of lessons and so many different subjects, is not an easy task unless you are very gifted for languages. So it gives them an enormous amount of confidence to know that they can summarize in a set of flashcards the key questions for the oral test. And I've seen very good results. Students who were sometimes struggling, I talk about it in one of my books, how one of the examples was very dramatic. A student who could barely pass at the beginning of the year and at the end manages to get a 60-something, which is a good mark in a university, in her oral test, just by applying this strategy of flashcards. Now, some students, obviously these days, most of them will be doing them electronically, which is fine. It's very convenient. They have it in their mobile. The advantage is also that they have the audio version of the question and sentences, which is great for pronunciation, to practice pronunciation. So they can do them electronically, but I tell you, it's quite interesting to see how some of them choose still to do them on paper. They enjoy a bit the artistic side. I encourage them when they do it on paper to use some drawings because it's well researched that images, when we connect images with content, with language content, we remember much more the language content. So there you see some of the drawings that they've done in their flashcards. And the one on the right, you see, again, is questions. I encourage them very much at lower levels to do flashcards with questions and answers, to start developing like templates of dialogues in their heads with this. And here you have the feedback. I'm not going to read it because it gets very heavy, but I'm going to give you a few minutes for you to read through. This is what they say in their questionnaires. In some of the questionnaires I've given them at the end of the year after doing these strategy training sessions. This is what they say, the feedback that they give. So please take your time to read them. So as you can see in this one, they acknowledge that it helps them to prioritize, it helps them to study more productively, to allocate time, that there was the variety approach, the fact that there is choice, which is something that some of you were mentioning. In this one, they talk about motivation, confidence, discovering new things, like I learned different techniques that I didn't know exist. Because often what I find is that they come with a very narrow range of strategies. Very rarely I find students who use, for instance, a vocabulary notebook systematically. Another one about flashcards. So with the flashcards, it's interesting also that they mention the creative side, and that is very convenient. See, I teach in London, and in London, people are very busy commuting. We spend an enormous amount of time commuting. So if you have in your mobile, the flashcards, or in a little bag, then like this student was mentioning that she produced that notebook, a small notebook. You take it with you, and when you are in the tube or in the bus, you can take a bit of time to do revision. So this is on Quizlet. I'm guessing that some of you will be familiar. Are you familiar with Quizlet? It's an application for flashcards. Yes, some of you. Okay. Okay. If you are not familiar with it, you may just Google it and find the application. Some of you already encourage them to. Duolingo and Quizlet seem to be some of the most popular ones these days. Anki as well. Yes. Yeah. Great. Now, please read this one and I'll tell you the context. So this is a student, she was a very mature student at university, and she took on board this using Quizlet. And there she is, and then I talked with her about it, how clearly the difference she noticed when in the topic in which she didn't use Quizlet, she could not remember as much as in the other topics where she had used the Quizlet application. So it was very interesting to hear it from a student who was very aware. She had a good ability on this. The difference that she already noticed, that it makes a difference. Here is my own perception about this kind of work, is that it's not just the cognitive aspect that the students get better, is that the affective response is very positive. You know, I see the students, the group cohesion, when they start discussing how they are learning, somehow the atmosphere in the class gets very nice. It's like, I suppose it's because they are not used to talking about it, but I tell you, it's like it develops a very friendly environment. So, and they respond at the level of confidence and motivation, which is related to emotions and affect. So I see that as one of the positive results of using this training. They improve enormously taking notes after we do some of this training. I see that they are more organized. They start using color coding, which I encourage them very much to use. In Spanish, we have masculine, feminine, we have verb endings. All these things are, if you use color coding, it's a lot easier to work with them. I see much better performance, particularly in oral exams, and confidence. So my own perception is that this is worth doing, worth investing the time. One thing more before we get on to the next is that the biggest challenge I have found in this is to make the time for it, because in the programs there was a couple of years where it was part of the program, so we allocated time to it, then was easy. But now the strategies are not part of the program again. I'm not in charge, not coordinating the Spanish modules. And so I have to myself manage to find the time. And that's what makes it challenging for me. But I know it's worth doing because I see such a positive result. So I do. I kind of shorten some activities, or I find a way to get sessions from time to time of 10 or 15 minutes. About 5 sessions in a whole year is enough to make a difference. So the next step is, if you wanted to do something similar, and I hope some of you join us in this, I give you in the handout, you'll have this, and the same as the steps I mentioned before. I give you a checklist, which is part of the book also I've written. First of all, for me, what makes sense is to set up objectives. What are your objectives for the training? What skills or elements of the language do you want the students to improve through the training? So the first thing would be to think about your objectives. In my case, for example, with vocabulary, it's just as simple as to give them a wide range of strategies for learning vocabulary. That's my objective. Then the content is what strategies do you think would help them to achieve the objectives? And you don't have to, with the ones that I give you probably you will find everything you need in the handout I give you, or others that you are familiar with, or just searching in internet. But it doesn't require much thinking, really, this list of strategies with the content. Then develop materials. In my case, I simply do the PowerPoint presentations. That's all I do. And then, particularly at the beginning, when these days I barely ask them for written feedback, but at the beginning I did that for some years to see how they were reacting, to make sure that I wasn't just going on my own trip, that I thought it was working very well and that perhaps they were not liking it that much, or they thought it was too much or too little, and that gave me an enormous amount of reassurance that it was working. The most negative, if you could call negative, comments were a couple of them where the students said, I already knew this and I would rather be doing more of the language. Because we also get from time to time students who have learned several languages and are very good at it. And in the same class, you have it with students who have barely learned a foreign language. So they are in a very different space, and it's a bit tricky sometimes to manage that. But the overall feedback I would get, if I was you starting, I would get some form of feedback, formal feedback from students. So these are the 4 main points: to set objectives, to decide which content, to develop the materials, and then to get some feedback from the students, that you will have your program done. I myself do this I try to prepare all this stuff in summer before I start the next academic year, so that I have already these things ready, because once the academic year starts, we get so busy that it's quite hard to get on with these extra things. So right now, for instance, I have my PowerPoint presentations ready for the new year, and I've already started in the classes doing it. Okay, so now we come we have still 15 minutes left, and it would be great if we could have some questions, comments. It's a pity that I cannot see your faces, because it's so much easier when seeing people's faces, but that's the way it is. So I'm going to stop. Yeah. So can you please write it on the question and answers section, your questions, comments. If you have any experience already, that's also something perhaps you could share there. Okay, here is the first one. Would it be possible to get a copy? I'm going to give you the handout, which has all the key elements of the PowerPoint and more, because I give you, right now, I'm going to share it with you, and I'm going to put it in the platform as well. But if you want to make sure, you hold on a moment. Just wanted to see whether you have any questions apart from the handout. Kate, you are sharing, I used to do how to use a dictionary, beginner's course. Great. Anybody else has experience doing some strategy training like this? Even if it's very simple, how to teach them how to do flashcards or the vocabulary notebooks, or how to improve their speaking. I'm just a language learner, but I love the organization of the notebook. Yeah. I just jot down stuff in my notebook, but don't have any organization. I can see the difference. Great, Mary. Yeah, lovely. So if that gives you ideas, great. You made me aware that I have to discuss it in class. Yes, please do it. We will make a huge difference to bring into the class the how to learn. How to learn. How are you learning now? How could you improve your learning skills? That's great. And I tell you, they get very chatty when it comes to that. When you put them in pairs first to discuss, and they just go blah, 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 really? And I have to call at one point and say, okay, now we share. And it's great to hear it from them. More things, Susanna? Do you have specific strategies in the handout? Yes. Send students is special. Sorry, would you mind saying what send students is? Special, I'm not sure. I don't have anything for students with dyslexia. It's a topic in which I am very interested as well. Some coursebooks do include such tips now, yes. L Actual, for example, yes. Have you tried these strategies with younger learners? No, with the youngest, 14, 15 for GCSE, yes. And it worked, not with younger. I taught just for a few months younger students. No, I haven't done that. How will you help a student with learning disabilities such as dyslexia? That's what I'm mentioning. I don't have any qualifications on this, but when I've spoken to people who know, or some of my students with dyslexia, it seems to be that many of the strategies that I work with help them already. Multisensorial learning seems to be very important. Color coding, mind mapping. That kind of approach seems to help them already, but unfortunately I couldn't give you more advice on that. Yeah. Special education needs, that's what I mean. That I haven't worked in that field really. This is something that perhaps I know. If you email me, I have a course. I found a course, one of these free courses that you can do through a university, that then if you pay, you get and you pass an exam, you get a certification, which is for, I think it's for dyslexia, for teachers who teach foreign languages to students with dyslexia. I haven't done it myself, but I know of one of them. Yeah. Any more comments? Pilar, I totally agree that it's essential to be more efficient. I like sharing with my students different techniques. Wonderful. I also work with them how to approach a text. Great. Following certain steps. Yeah. Reading the title and questions. Yes, that's what it is about. Yes. Working now with younger learners. Anna, if you like, email me and I can send you the reference of some websites where or researchers who do this kind of research at the school level. So you have my email there. I cannot find the Q. Anese, on the, I suppose it's on the lower side of your screen. There is a chat that says Q&A. And you will see the number 21 probably because there are 21 comments. Q&A. Otherwise, write it on the chat. I can have a look at the chat as well. Younger. Would you encourage students to make lists which includes language from the same theme or topic? Not mixed lists. Like in the vocabulary notebook, the heading, for example, the town, and then places of interest, subheading, and then the list. Then characteristics, and then the list of of adjectives. For example, with food and drinks is very easy at the restaurant. So food, then drinks or hot drinks, cold drinks. To get it organized, it seems to help a lot the mind to process well and remember better vocabulary. Color coding as well. The handout, I'm about to share it. The course, I cannot do it here. I have to look for that. It's better if you email me and then I send you, and with your question, because I have many different questions, and then I would look for the course. Okay, so I'm going to share the handout. Okay, here it goes as a PDF. Can you see it? Not yet? Okay. Well, for some reason, then it's not going through. Well, I will upload it in, yes, I put it on the chat. I will upload it in the platform where you went, and you will have to go if you want to see again the recording. And there is a space for materials. I will upload it there. And if you have any difficulty finding it, just email me and I'll email it to you. I'm going to share it on the screen so that you see what you are getting. No, it's not for the speakers. It will be for everybody. Let's see, downloads. Can you see it now on the screen? Yes. Can you see it? Great. Okay. So this is what you get in the handout. A summary of the 4 steps, a checklist for designing your program, examples of strategies, bibliography, and my contact details. So that's the summary. I think the simplest is with the 4 steps there with the image. You have the list, the checklist. And then this comes from one of my books, which is called How to Learn Spanish, where in the appendix, in the last section of the book, I give a list of strategies that I usually give to my students. It's a very long list. So you can get ideas from here for speaking, for vocabulary, for grammar, listening. Then I give you also the more reading for if you want. I have a book which is called How to Learn Spanish, where I discuss these strategies, but it's a book initially is written for students, but for teachers may be also useful. And then academic books, if you are interested in research, these are the books that I have used myself for doing research on the topic. Some of the articles I've written, they are academic, and my contact details. So that you will get there, and if not, please email me. Any further questions? I've shared it on the chat, but it didn't seem to work for some reason. Sorry. And you can see the chat for 3 months. Yes. Yes. I very much encourage you to do this work. I would be very surprised if you don't have a very positive experience with the students. It's a matter of adapting it to your context, to the needs of the students and what you feel comfortable. And because you know what they are assessed on, it should help them to do well in the assessment, in the coursework, and the final, in the end of the year exams. Okay. Anything more? Thank you all for coming. I'll just wait in case that there are some more questions because we still have a few minutes left. Did you share it to everyone? No, I shared it. Oh, sorry, you are right. Yes, everyone. Yes, I get it. Now, hold on. Yeah, I didn't know that I had to do that. Handout. Now, can you access it now? Yes. Okay, good that you waited until the end. Well done. Thank you. Patience virtue, yes. Do feel free to contact if you have any further questions, comments, or if you just simply want to contact. I'm always delighted to talk to people who are interested in this topic. Great. Thank you. Thank you all. Yeah, no more. If there are no more questions, then we finish here. Gracias. Mucha suerte. Lots of good luck. Thank you. Gracias, Pilar. You might have. Oh, the whole folder. When it wasn't my intention. Sometimes these things happen. Nice to have met you. Yeah. Agnes, what do you mean by showed? Thank you. But did you get the point was for you to get the handout? Did you see it in the chat? And the articles. Yes, on the screen, no problem. But what did you get? Did you get the handout? Sure. Okay. The handout is on this on the chat. I'll go again. Scroll up. Okay, I'll put it again. Yeah. Handout. Okay, there you have it again. Yes, good. 9 pages. Yes, that's the one. Thank you. Thank you so much. See you.